More on the president's action today from ABC White House correspondent Bill Gill.
President Johnson's absentee message to Texas Democrats is
the beginning of an earnest attempt to end speculation about his support of Vice President Humphrey. The telegram asked that Texans close ranks behind Mr. Humphrey, and it lends strong support of his qualifications. For Mr. Johnson said, Hubert Humphrey is a fighter and a patriot. I have watched him give his courage, common sense, and compassion to America. And that is why I picked him as my vice president, as the man best qualified to serve a heartbeat away from the presidency. And then he said, I feel even more strongly about his qualifications today. Mr. Johnson then warned that, as he put it, a Democratic victory in November will spell the difference between world order and world chaos. This is the strongest public endorsement of Mr. Humphrey to come from the White House since the vice president was congratulated following the Chicago nominations. The president is known to be gravely concerned with the public furor created by obvious conflicts in Vietnam policy, as stated and set forth in his speeches and those of Mr. Humphrey in recent days. Mr. Johnson is also known to feel that there is no basis for charges by the news media that he is attempting to dictate Mr. Humphrey's campaign statements. He has strongly declared, in fact, that he expects Mr. Humphrey to make his own decisions, to run his own campaign, and, in the words of many critics, to be his own man. Nevertheless, there are obvious and important differences in the policies being enunciated by Mr. Johnson, who is the president, and by Mr. Humphrey, who wants to become the president. Those differences result from the public positions as stated by both men, and the news media did not invent them, but it has and it will continue to report them. This is Bill Gill at the White House.
The vice president felt obliged again today to deal with the question of his relationship with the president. Mr. Humphrey told students at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York, that he is a free man and, if elected, will do whatever needs to be done to end the war in Vietnam. His statement was made during a question and answer session with the students.
Now, what did I say in my acceptance speech? I said the first priority of the next president of the United States will be to secure peace in Vietnam. I made that commitment. Secondly, I said that I would not feel bound by the policies of the past to guide my actions on the questions of the future. And then I said this relates particularly to Vietnam. I am a free man. I will do what I think I need to do if I become president of the United States to end this war, to do it honorably, to do it in terms of our national interest and in the security of Southeast Asia. But I want to make it very, very clear that I have no control over events between now and January the 20th. You have one president at a time. That's about all you need.
The vice president then made this plea to the young people of the country.
My plea to the university today, and I think this is as good a place as any to make it, is not that you hush your tongue, not that you challenge the institutions of the time, not that you fail to show your disdain and your feelings of disgust with some things that take place, but rather that you do it in a way that commands respect, because then and only then can you really influence public opinion. Then and only then can you really change things. You do not change the world in which you live by acting as if somehow or another your mind had been filled with bigotry, intolerance, and hate.
In a moment, a report on Richard Nixon's news conference.
Good thing this long day began with cream of wheat cereal.
The fortified mix and eat kind. One bowlful gives him vitamins, food energy, and a full day's supply of iron.
Guards him through all the day, the work, the play, the joy of being a boy.
Better guard him again with hot cream of wheat. Quick cooking or mix and eat.
Cream of wheat.
Can a breakfast cereal make George Adams better looking? Why do you think George always has spoon-sized shredded wheat by Nabisco? All those tiny biscuits are packed with natural wheat protein to help make you feel good. And when you feel that good, you're gonna look great. Can spoon-size or the original Nabisco shredded wheat make you better looking? Maybe not. maybe you'll just feel on top of the world, like George.
Richard Nixon suggested today that Hubert Humphrey's campaign leaders in the South may be secretly working with supporters of George Wallace in order to force the election into the House of Representatives. Nixon made the assertion at a news conference in Anaheim, California, at which he also said he is sending former Governor William Scranton of Pennsylvania to Europe to meet with leaders from London, Brussels, Bonn, and Paris to discuss the NATO alliance, the common market, and the Middle East situation. More on Nixon's news conference now from ABC's Ted Koppel.
To most politicians, news conferences are a useful tool to gain the public's attention. To Richard Nixon, who is getting all the attention he can use, they are more of a potential hazard than anything else. Today in Anaheim, though, Mr. Nixon showed once again that he's become very adept at threading this particular obstacle course. He sidestepped the question of where his position on law and order differs from that of Governor Wallace. Then on the same subject, he took a mild poke at Vice President Humphrey.
Where his statement fails, of course, is in the specifics. He fails where he does not recognize that it isn't just a question of having plenty of police and well-trained police, but it's a question also of seeing to it that the hands of the police are not tied by restrictions imposed by what I think are some unfortunate decisions by some of our courts. Now, let me make clear when I talk about the courts that I'm not casting reflections on the courts as an institution. The minority members of the court are part of the court just as much as the majority members of the court.
Getting back to the subject of Governor Scranton's trip to Europe, is there any particular reason why the subject of Vietnam is not on his agenda?
One of the reasons that I did not give him specifically that assignment is that diplomatic discussions of this sort, even though they're unofficial in character, do not remain confidential. And I would not want Governor Scranton, directly or indirectly, to make any statement to a European leader that could be misinterpreted and get back to the negotiators in Paris and weaken the hands of our negotiating team.
Nixon refused to take a stand either for or against the Abe Fortas nomination as Chief Justice. He said also that he would be willing to participate in a national TV debate, but not if that debate included third or fourth party candidates. Nixon knows that the surest way to forfeit his current advantage in the campaign is to get trapped into taking a controversial stand on a delicate issue. It's not easy to walk out of one of these news conferences without a scar to show for it, but today in Anaheim, Richard Nixon did it again. This is Ted Koppel, ABC, with the Nixon campaign.
The Republican vice presidential candidate, Spiro Agnew, said today the Johnson administration suffers from tired blood. And Governor Agnew said the tonic is not a number 2 man, but a new man. Agnew told the Texas State Republican Convention in Fort Worth that the first priority of the Nixon-Agnew administration must be to end the war, but Agnew emphasized to end it honorably, consistent with America's limited aims, and, as he put it, with the long-term requirements of peace in Asia. In New York City, Democratic vice presidential candidate Edmund Muskie said Mr. Nixon is hiding his views, and he called on Nixon to speak out on the issues, especially on Vietnam. In Dallas, third-party candidate George Wallace accepted the presidential nomination of his party's Texas State Convention, and Wallace told the convention that Texas will be one of his good states, but he said he is just as strong in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Long Beach, California. In a moment, an American official in Vietnam gives his view on corruption in the Saigon government.
Ethel, these are absolutely the best hors d'oeuvres I've ever tasted.
Why, thank you, Ralph.
Spots? Reach for Texize K2R, the spot remover that works. Spray the spot. Let K2R dry completely to a powder. Then remove the powder. K2R lifts the spot clean out and never leaves a ring. Texize K2R, world's first spot lifter, in spray can or tube.
Nervous? Big meeting. The boss. Look out! Oh, just what I need.
Here comes acid indigestion. Excess acid's dripping like a faucet. He needs Triactin, the antacid with a special stomach-relaxing ingredient. Triactin not only neutralizes acid, Triactin goes further to help turn off the excess acid faucet. Excess acid's gone, indigestion's gone. Triactin helps turn off the excess acid faucet, liquid or tablets.
Last night, South Vietnamese Rangers were moving across an open field to take up a new position about 10 miles south of Da Nang when an enemy force opened up on them with rockets. And then the communist soldiers charged, lobbing grenades into the government unit. The South Vietnamese Rangers broke and ran. Apparently, they were demoralized by the surprise attack. 4 Americans were with the South Vietnamese. They were able to escape. One survivor said the South Vietnamese wouldn't move during the day, and when they tried moving after dark, they got completely messed up. The enemy hit us with rockets, and the whole operation fell apart. The South Vietnamese battalion suffered the loss of 37 men killed, and 80 were wounded. Farther north, just 4 miles below the demilitarized zone, the enemy tried much the same tactic against a group of U.S. Marines, first a mortar barrage, then a ground attack. The Marines held and killed 27 of the North Vietnamese troops, but in that same fight, at least 25 Marines were killed and 126 were wounded. Near Tay Ninh, about 45 miles northwest of Saigon, American troops of the 25th Infantry Division have killed 117 North Vietnamese in 3 separate clashes. 9 Americans were killed and 26 were wounded. The treatment of South Vietnamese refugees has been denounced by an American aid official in Vietnam. Dennis Smith has served nearly 17 months in AID's Vietnam Refugee Program. He has been the refugee advisor to the mayor of Saigon and deputy chief of refugee operations. Smith says he is resigning from aid because of the corruption in the Saigon government and the inefficiency in the U.S. organization. Smith talked with ABC's Craig Spence in Saigon.
Mr. Smith, why are you resigning?
I'm resigning because I'm tired of being a part of the hypocrisy that has engulfed this whole refugee program. And I'm disgusted with the government of Vietnam continuously capitalizing on the tragedies of its own people. And I'm fed up with the systematic form of corruption that has become a way of life here in Vietnam.
Could you give me some specifics in terms of these allegations?
I give you a multitude of specifics just from my own personal experience. Take a Da Nang refugee camp in Pleiku province in Tu Quoc. U.S. Army moved some 10,000 Montagnards as a strategic move into a refugee camp. Well, the GVN neglected this camp so badly that we had hundreds of refugees starving. Matter of fact, it was the first time that I've ever seen a refugee child starve to death. She died in my arms on the way to the province hospital. The sanitation conditions and the health conditions of the camp were so wretched that thousands of those refugees last January escaped from the camp and went back to the original villages. But they didn't last very long. The ARVN troops went in, some American troops, and forced them back out and burnt the homes down in front of them and forced them back into Da Nang. From there, take Binh Dinh province, for instance. There's 269,000 refugees in Binh Dinh. They were getting piastre support, aluminum roofing, cement, thousands of bags of cement and aluminum roofing. And I went up to check on the distribution of these commodities and discovered that some 100,000 refugees never really existed at all, and that the refugee chief and other provincial officials were selling the commodities that were given to them by the United States government, and they were sharing the profits.
But what about Saigon? What about the refugees there?
Well, Saigon, you'd think the life for the refugee would be a little bit better, but it really isn't. Take, for instance, Petros Key Refugee Camp, which is the largest camp in all of Vietnam. We have 14,000 refugees there that are victims of the Tet Offensive. And these people have lost all their earthly possessions, and some of them have lost even members of their own families. Well, these people were brought into this particular camp, Petros Key. But before they could get in there, they had to come up with a bribe of 20,000 piastres. That's about 170 US dollars, just to get into the camp. To top it off, the sanitation conditions, the drainage, there's a contract awarded for something like 3.2 million piastres. When this contract was awarded, the contractor did 50% of his work and then has refused to put in the sewage system, so the latrines are now backing up, and have refused to clean the drainage ditches, and the drainage ditch leads nowhere whatsoever. This type of unhealthy and very dangerous situation is the type of situation that you find throughout our refugee camps in Saigon.
Now, Ambassador Comer, Mr. Smith, said that all the Tet refugees and May 5th refugees have been resettled.
Well, Ambassador Comer has said a lot of things, not only about the refugee camp, that shows to me that either he is deliberately covering up for what is going on here in Vietnam, or he doesn't know. And if he doesn't know, then that's just a matter of incompetence on his part.
In the official pronouncements and press releases, there seems to be an air of optimism.
Yes, well, this was a well-thought-out plan by AID and Cords here. We've been given the official word, right down through to each and every advisor in the provinces, that we're to talk very positively about the programs and that we are to remain silent about any type of corruption or a negative type of reaction to our program. We're supposed to make complaints within the system, in quotes. But the trouble with this is that for this past 16 to 17 months that I've been in Vietnam, every time I put the heat on to bring about some constructive change within the system, the only thing I get is transferred, or I get a verbal response from somebody saying, well, don't worry about it. After all, the Vietnamese people have been under these conditions for years. This is the type of attitude and philosophy that is running throughout the aid program here that is going to destroy it.
Aid officials in Washington today had no comment on Smith's charges or his reported resignation. The Senate Judiciary Committee acts on the Fortas nomination. That report in a moment.
Hair coloring isn't all it's cracked up to be. Sometimes you lay an egg. Some colorings make your hair uneven. Others cover the gray. No more. But new Technique Shampoo In brings all your hair to life. So your gray disappears while your natural color comes out of its shell. And you feel sunny side up because you look like a chick again.
This is a man. He works hard, plays hard, never stops. This is Manpower, the antibacterial deodorant made just for men. Manpower checks odor-crossing bacteria on the most active man. Never stops before he does. If you're a man, this is your deodorant. It's as simple as that. Manpower, the antibacterial deodorant for men.
After a summer of debate and delay, the Senate Judiciary Committee today approved the nomination of Abe Fortas to be Chief Justice of the United States. The vote was 11 in favor, 6 opposed, and the nomination now goes to the floor of the Senate, where the real battle will be fought. Opponents of the Fortas nomination plan a filibuster against it. And the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today took positive action on another controversial issue. By a vote of 13-3, the committee recommended that the full Senate approve the treaty designed to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union already has signed the treaty. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has become a partisan political issue in this country, and guest commentator William Buckley has this to say about it.
Hubert Humphrey's dogged search for a big issue which will divide him from Richard Nixon has, it is being speculated, finally ended. It is to be the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. Humphrey is for its instant ratification. Nixon is opposed. For the time being, says Mr. Nixon. It is a good idea, and the Senate should in due course ratify it, but let us wait and see first how the Soviet Union settles down. The purpose of the treaty is to prevent as many other countries in the world as possible from developing a nuclear arsenal. The principal signatories, Russia and the United States, would bind themselves to denying to any other country any of our nuclear materials or secrets. Mr. Nixon has not elaborated his misgivings, but presumably they have something to do with the recent unpleasantness in Czechoslovakia, which has inconvenienced the Johnson-Humphrey thesis that the Soviet Union has evolved in recent years under our cultural prodding into a lamb-like member of the international community, with whom one sits down at the conference table to share one's brotherly concern for the fractious nations of the world capable of disturbing the peace. The public has every right to be confused, and no doubt we have here the beginnings of a great debate, a debate which is much overdue. The genuine hunger for peace, on the basis of which we have in the past few years forgiven the Soviet Union practically everything, continues to blind us to the bayonet points of reality, such as arrested the brief, elating Czechoslovakian dream. And we know once again, and Nixon presumably knows, that our own dreams are secure only for so long as we maintain our strength and a healthy cynicism toward the peaceful rhetoric of the Soviet Union. This is William Buckley in New York.
Defense Secretary Clark Clifford disclosed today that between 20,000 and 40,000 American troops will be sent to Europe shortly, but only on a temporary basis. NATO maneuvers, which had been planned for the middle of 1969, have been advanced to early next year, and the additional troops will take part in those exercises. Clifford said the United States does not plan to increase its permanent troop strength in Europe. 6 U.S. Army divisions currently are stationed in West Germany. ABC's Pentagon correspondent Bill Downs reports that the West Germans and other NATO allies are concerned about the substantial increase in Soviet troops in Eastern Europe since the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Before that took place, the Russians had 24 divisions in the Warsaw Pact area. Now they have 36 divisions in Eastern Europe. And the West Germans feel that a show of American determination to defend Europe is especially important right now.
Helen, I've got the solution.
Not a padded bra.
No, this is slightly padded.
Slightly padded?
Just a 1/16 of an inch lining. Adds shaping, not inches. And it's a Playtex Cross Your Heart. You know, crosses your heart with stretch, lifts, separates, you're suddenly shapelier.
1/16 of an inch?
Adds shaping, not inches.
The new Playtex Cross Your Heart slightly padded bra. Sometimes a little can do a lot.
Announcing a comfortable way to look 5 pounds thinner. The new 5 pounds thinner girdle by Playtex. Prove it yourself. Fingertips so. Press in. See? The new Playtex girdle has fingertip panels to hold you in firmly. Yet it's so different. Feels like nothing you've ever felt before. Look 5 pounds thinner without losing a pound.
Also from Playtex, Golden Girdles, now on sale. Save $2.
The Senate continued debate today on a gun control bill. This afternoon, an amendment was added to the bill which would require imprisonment up to life for any person using a gun while committing a crime. The foreign aid bill has been cut again. A House Appropriations Subcommittee lopped off nearly $400 million, and the appropriation now stands at $1,600 million. That's not much more than 1/2 of the amount originally requested by the president. From Czechoslovakia today, another indication that the Czechs are balking at restrictions imposed by the Russians. A spokesman for the government travel agency said Czech embassies abroad have been told to issue visas to individual tourists to allow them to enter Czechoslovakia whenever they please. On the New York Stock Exchange today, Dow Jones Industrials were up more than 1 1/2 points. Close to 14 million shares were traded. The New York Stock Exchange Index was up 13 cents. On the American Stock Exchange, more than 6.5 million shares were traded. The American Stock Exchange Index was up 6 cents. In a moment, a look at a new airliner designed to beat air traffic congestion.
Can this exquisitely proportioned beauty survive? She's about to be tormented. Watch. 27 tons of sand and rock will crash down on our beauty. We're talking about the elegant new ballpoint pen from Bic. The refillable Click. Can the Click survive? We'll soon know. Dare we look? Yes, the sleek finish gleams. Retracting mechanism works perfectly, but will write. Like all Bics, the new Click writes first time, every time. Its diamond ball never fails. Carry it proudly.
Pick up a beauty today. The new Big Click. Refillable. 8 delicious colors. Very expensive. 49 cents each. You'd be silly to spend more for any pen.
70 planes had to wait up to 50 minutes each before they could land yesterday evening at New York's Kennedy Airport. Now, that waiting time is now routine, day-by-day proof that today's planes need a long runway to land and that there are too few runways available. Aircraft designers may have come up with a solution to air traffic congestion in the United States. A report now from ABC science editor Jules Bergman.
Today's jets need a mile or more of runway to safely land and take off, and there's never enough land to build new runways. Too often, the major jet ports can only use one runway at a time. The jets stack up, delays begin, people get angry. The answer is STOL, short takeoff and landing planes that can get off and get down using a fraction of the runway needed by today's jets. The first practical STOL transport was shown to federal officials today in Washington. The McDonnell 188 seems to be falling like a rock, yet it comes in more slowly than most small planes. Its huge flaps and reversing prop jets stop it in 300 feet of runway. Full stop in 9 seconds. Today's flight kicks off an Eastern Airlines and McDonnell experiment to prove that STOL planes can beat airport congestion. Early versions carry 60 passengers, later ones will carry 100. Taking off, the 188 is just as phenomenal. The huge propellers hurl a hurricane of air onto the flaps, practically tossing the 188 into the sky. In today's test, it was airborne 400 feet after it started rolling. STOL planes may be the answer on short-range shuttle flights. They can use 1,000-foot-long runways, and with new kinds of navigational devices, widen the aerial highways to take more planes at once. Here's the approach now to the new STOL runway at Washington National Airport, a steep descent path under the other planes and safely on the ground. The 6-week experiment is aimed at proving that STOL planes really work. STOL, a new word that may mean an end to air traffic congestion. This is Jules Bergman reporting.
Well, that's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.